I had the experience 4 years ago in my first race for the state senate, where I was attacked by a group that had an amorphous name, Citizens for whatever, Good Government, something like that. And they attacked me pretty rough. Had some mailings out there. It wasn't generated locally. It wasn't, the Republicans who I know in these communities might not have voted for me, but they certainly wouldn't launch an attack like that. But these guys did. And then I found out it was an exact similar graphic and message to attacks on other Senate Democrats around the state. So we tried to track down, I think the newspapers did, tried to track down the source of this money. It went to a post office box in Virginia, and they couldn't find any principals involved. And that dark money, wherever it's coming from, it's certainly thwarting the will of people. If the voters of Mamaroneck, Larchmont, and the other communities in the district, Eastchester and Rye and Rybrook and wherever, if they're tired of the current legislator, they have every right to vote a different way. But they're being influenced by people from San Diego who have a vested interest in a certain decision being made in Albany.
An economic interest.
And they're making the decision that if I help these guys help me with my economic issues, George Latimer is just a sideshow, collateral damage.
And you know what, George, I think part of what this all does, and I remember that campaign, and it was particularly, heinous, the stuff they put out. But I think what all of this does is it lowers the amount of voter participation. Because people get all this awful stuff in the mail, and they say, I'm not even going to go to vote. Who needs this? And that's what the people with the money and the people, with the power want. They want less people participating, because that way it's easier to mold the story.
Well, and also, it's a reality that people who have a vested interest in the outcome are more motivated to vote, to donate, and so forth. You get a good rainstorm and somebody says it's kind of raining today, I'm not going out to vote. Somebody says, listen, you get out to vote. Our economic interests are at stake here. If our guy gets in, we're going to make a ton of money off of this decision.
You and I have done many elections, and I always tell the story, like if someone likes you, and they could see you the day after the election, say, oh, Tom, yesterday was election day. I meant to vote, but I had to pick up my kid, but I like it. If that person hates you, it could be a tornado. They're going to vote.
As I fondly said, I said they'll walk on 10 miles of broken glass barefoot with somebody on their shoulders if they don't like it.
If they don't like it, exactly. But yeah, so sometimes that's a stronger motivator. Let's talk a little more about ethics, because I know you've always been a proponent of ethics. In local government, we talk about the appearance of impropriety. And it seems in the state government, it's just have I been indicted?
Well,
unfortunately. I was hoping that with the change of Flanagan and Hesty, they would have motivation to want to change this, but it just doesn't seem like that's.
Very, very little improvement, and I'll tell you, unfortunately, part of it is go back to what I think is the headwaters source of all the corruption, and that is the way we redistrict whenever we have districted seats.
When I say Flanagan and Hesty, I'm talking about the head of the Senate, who's a Republican, and the head of the Assembly, who's a Democrat. So this is a bipartisan.
So in the redistricting plan, when you control the crayons, and I had that power in 2001 when I chaired the Westchester County Legislature, and we did, obviously it's going to sound self-serving. You'd have to go back to the archives to see if I'm telling the truth. We ran as bipartisan a redistricting plan as we could. It was endorsed by the Journal News and other things. But most of the time, redistricting is an opportunity for the guys who have the power to beat the living, stuffings out of the people who don't have power. And what they do is very simple. They create a small number of districts that the other side can win, and only them, and then they keep a majority of them for the ones that they can win. And then there's a bunch of fair fight districts in the middle, but it's a very small amount. What that does is it changes the dynamic of how competitive elections are, and therefore how you can channel money into a handful of elections, and therefore you can skew the elections ethically on significant money poured into a target district. And of course, when you have that, then you're in a much better position to maintain power. And by the way, there are voters out there who put party loyalty above, integrity. And I can give you 4 examples in the November election of 2014. A congressman, Republican, a state senator, Republican, a state senator, Democrat, an assemblyman, Democrat, all under indictment, all reelected. Wow. And within 6 months, all 4 of them out of office, because the wheels of justice caught up with them.
So
but
the
voters
sometimes
voted
in ourselves and not in our stars.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Brutus said it, and there we are sometimes. Now, that doesn't put the onus on the voter. What it does say is that if you want a good, engaged public official, then you, the voter, also has to participate. You should know not just what somebody says about my record, but you should be able to go online, because it's there, and actually look at my record. What did I vote yes or no on? You know, and when those things don't happen, look at the debates. LMC is terrific about having all these debates, you know, and if people watch it, then you'll be able to size up and make evaluative choices. But if you don't do that, and then you lean back just on party affiliation or just on, you know, I like what he said when I heard it on TV once, that gets you the government you deserve.
Exactly. You know, I always say if we put as much effort into elections as we do into watching the Super Bowl, we'd all be a little better off.
No question. I mean, I'm a sports nut.
I
We could sit here and talk about, you know, the Mets pitching staff or what's going on with the Yankees hitting, and you know, other people around us would have in-depth knowledge and discussion and debates, and then we talk about a public policy issue, people's eyes glaze over. Gee, I don't know, is my taxes going up? And then that's the end of the discussion, and that's not what the founding fathers intended. They intended for us to be engaged in the process.
Yes. And to have a responsibility to educate ourselves. So hopefully something will change in the future. You know, I hate to see that, you know, the only impetus to change is indictments and the U.S. attorney. You know, sooner or later, and I know you're on board with me here, but
absolutely.
And I just hope that those of you who feel that way strongly, you know, will in the end.
Here's where I think that Preet Bharara has done us all a service. He's put a cop on the beat.
Yes.
And you'd like to think that we're all going to be honest for our own reasons everywhere you go. And I know the figurative policeman on the beat doesn't exist, although here in Mamaroneck Village you have them on bicycles, so they're nearby. But the sense is that somebody's watching, and you'd better not cross the line. So your natural tendency to honesty is great and enough for some people, but for those who might consider doing something wrong, there's a surety of your being caught, and the punishment will be severe enough, and that will restrain
Right. I mean, like Silva just got 12 years. For a 72-year-old man, it's almost a life sentence.
Well, and you know, and he had tremendous power that he used, you know, with his own personal discretion for a long, long time.
His own
but
fiefdom.
A professional prosecutor was able, in very short order, to put the case together and make it stick.
Yes.
And that is a good sign for the system, that the system,
You're right.
you know, it may grind slowly, but it grinds exceedingly fine.
Yes, he did. And you're right. We all owe him a debt of gratitude. But just, there's been an issue that's come up locally that is kind of had its genesis in the state in the governor's office, and that has to do with this. Every 30 years or so, they talk about a bridge or a tunnel between Westchester County and Long Island. And they're talking about it possibly costing $10 billion. I would hope that if we had $10 billion, there were other projects we could spend it on, other, like we talked about before, bridges that are actually crumbling. Right. But what do you think about the prospects of that? What are your feelings about that?
Well, you know, look, I think when I look at the project, I have to list 10, 12, 15 necessary projects well in advance of that. Because right now what we're facing, you talked about it earlier, and it's true at the state level, we have existing infrastructure that's crumbling. We need to worry about sewer pipes and water pipes and roadways, and bridges
that we have
that exist right now. So I was a big fan of the governor getting out in front on the redoing of the Tappan Zee Bridge. Absolutely necessary. I'm a big fan of the governor saying we need a second tunnel under the Hudson to accommodate rail, both commuter rail into Manhattan and then intercity rail from Boston to Washington. Those are existing traffic patterns that are essential. When we talk about putting a tunnel, that's the most recent proposal, under the Long Island Sound, first of all, it's going to be fantastically expensive. You're talking about whatever the Tappan Zee Bridge is going to be, this tunnel would be more than double the cost. And then probably the toll, when it's all said and done, would be like a $25 toll. So the thought that this is for, you know, the secretary who's going to live in Rye Brook and commute to Melville, Long Island to a job, that's just not a realistic expectation. I think the expectation is this is to help develop the eastern end of Long Island more quickly. And I think, and this is, you know, sounds sort of dramatic to say it, but I think what will happen is you'll take the Cross Westchester Expressway and you'll turn it into the Cross Bronx Expressway North. Because now if you're a trucker coming from the west or from the south,
you go to Long Island.
Just go right around, you stay off the Cross Bronx, which we know is a bumper-to-bumper traffic jam at all times of the day and night, and now you cut across Cross Westchester because you can get the tunnel going to Long Island now, and you can skirt around it. So I don't think that's a good outcome for those of us who use these roads. The feasibility, it's certainly engineering possible. That's not a question. The question is it a good cost-value relationship? I would say no.
And I would agree. I mean, for those who don't know at home, I'm sure George knows, this was Robert Moses' idea.
Right.
You know, we were supposed to take 287 was supposed to go right through Rye and across into Long Island.
Seaford Oyster Bay, connect to the Seaford Oyster Bay Expressway, which does exist. See, here's the thing. I understand that there are big projects, but I don't want legacy projects. I want projects that are an intelligent use of dollars and gets a return that's obvious to us.
Well, we need to finish the Second Avenue subway.
Second Avenue
The
subway.
Metro North needs a lot of work.
The fix on Penn Station is necessary. There are plans to expand it so that you can get on a commuter train in Mamaroneck or Harrison or Rye or Larchmont and go to Penn Station as well as go to Grand Central. That's
And vice versa, if you're coming from Long Island.
That's a capital project worth doing. It includes intermediate stops in Co-op City and Morris Park. So you have reverse commuters who work in New Rochelle and they live in the Bronx. All of that is intelligent capital spending, and I think all of those projects take priority over the tunnel.
Let me ask something. If you had your druthers and they were to give you one thing you could do in the state capitol, not in the capitol, but in your capacity, what would be the most important thing for you?
You know, I would go back to what we said before about redistricting. I think that you get the best possible energetic legislature when members understand that they have to work hard in order to keep their seats. When I look around a chamber, I have a competitive district. It's been competitive in 2 cycles. It will be competitive as long as the current line's structured. You work harder. You understand that you're not going to stay if you don't, produce energy and result. And I would have us redistrict in the middle of the decade, wipe out the partisan plan that was done 5-6 years ago, create an independent redistricting commission that had no control by those of us in the legislature or the governor. If you want to get some ex-judges to do it, get some ex-Supreme Court, somebody to do redo the redistricting plan, come up with lines that are clean and defensible, and then force us all to compete. And then people who say, well, we need term limits because it'll throw the bums out. Well, it'll throw everybody out, and it'll empower the staffs. But if you were sure that every single year you had 40 of those 63 seats that were truly competitive, and guys had to go out and hustle not just to campaign, but hustle to say, here's what I did for Larchmont, here's what I did for Mamaroneck, here's how I've tried to stay on top of these issues for the last 2 years. To justify you giving me another 2 years, it would change the complete climate of the legislature. But as long as you have this partisan redistricting stuff, all the other ills are going to continue. So that would be my magic wand issue. It's very unsexy.
No, but it's a good one because it's interesting because everybody now talks about how competition is good, but the people who would be really good to have a competition of ideas, that could control the redistricting, don't want to have competition. They want to have a sure. They want to have a sure thing. They want to have a. I know I'm going to win, and I know I'm going to have a majority, and we're going to work at it.
Changes the way you look at taxes. Changes the way you look at infrastructure improvements. Everything changes if you don't think you're going to be held accountable.
It moderates. It brings everybody closer to the middle because if you're running in a district that's 40% Republican and 60% Democrat, you have to kind of take account who you're dealing with. Right. If a Republican's running in a district that's 50-50, he can't come out with far right-wing ideas because he's not going to win. And I think that's what's happening in Congress too.
That's exactly right. And I think you've touched on what is the most key thing. If you're in a district that is so heavily one party or the other, your chance to lose the seat comes from somebody who goes further to your extreme. So if you go into government and you're a reasonable guy and your seat is challenged by somebody further to your right or left, depending on which end of the spectrum you're on, they win the seat based on winning the primary. They go into the legislature with no incentive to try to find common ground, no incentive to compromise. Their attitude is, as long as nobody gets further out than me, I'm going to keep coming back.
Just to put a point on that, I forget which senator it was. It was a Republican senator who said he would meet with Obama's Supreme Court nominee. So he said that, and then he got all kinds of threats to have a primary run against him, and he said, "No, I can't meet with you." So it's unfortunate. So we can't even be reasonable sometimes.
And I think one of the hard parts now, and this is a societal issue,
we got to wrap up
to deal with, is that if we're engaged in the process and we understand that the people who hold alternate positions to ours, we have to work with them, not try to steamroll them.
Exactly. George, thank you very much.
Tom,
I really appreciate this.
My pleasure.
Until the next time, I'm Tom Murphy, and we will see you in about a month. Have a good night.